by Catherine Powers and Ella Harrington. Donnie Darko, directed by Richard Kelly, follows a troubled teenage boy who struggles with emotional issues. Donnie's mind starts hallucinating a man in a bunny suit named Frank, who explains to Donnie that the world will be ending in 28 days. As a paranoid schizophrenic diagnosed by his therapist, Donnie is trying to understand how Frank seems to have time traveled to warn him about the world's end. Donnie wants to understand his hallucinations and looks to science instead of religion, despite the protest of many people in his town to understand his hallucinations and if Frank time traveled from the future.
Film description. This is not your traditional psychological movie. It adds sci-fi elements that make it more surprising for the viewers in the end. However, there are still psychological aspects that make up most of the movie's attributes. The film takes place in the 1980s in a small religious town named Middlesex, where everyone knows everyone. Mental health was only starting to be taken seriously, as Donnie Darko does receive help for medication for his illness and is treated through sessions and hypnotherapy by his therapist. In this town's culture, religion takes precedence over science, and all things are believed to be explained by God. Therefore, throughout the movie, Donnie is frequently asked if he believes in God and has religion pushed onto him to explain away his hallucinations. However, Donnie strays from the idea of God and looks to science to understand what Frank is telling him, Frank being his imaginary friend. Diagnosis. During the film, Donnie is shown talking with his therapist, who later talks with his parents, telling them that he has symptoms of a paranoid schizophrenic. Paranoid schizophrenia is when a person feels untrusting of others and acts out accordingly to that. This often comes with hallucinations. The film's context impacts the diagnosis because of the lack of treatment being given to him, which ends up causing harm to himself and others. In this movie, the diagnosis was made possible because the culture understood that Donnie needed help, whereas in other cultures, Donnie's diagnosis is non-existent and unbelieved. In other cases, Donnie may have been locked up or killed for his issues. Traditionally, when the thought of paranoid schizophrenics was tossed around, people thought crazy, unhuman, out of their minds, or untreatable. Nobody understands the diagnosis, so they judge it in ways that can be offensive.
Evidence. Seeing and hearing things that others do not. Donnie presents with his symptoms throughout the movie because he sees portals coming out of other people's chests. He can also see and hear Frank, which he calls his imaginary friend. Persistent, unusual thoughts or beliefs. Donnie presents with this symptom throughout the movie by having increased thoughts of time travel existing and that his imaginary friend has come from the future. Significant decline in self-care. Donnie presents with this symptom throughout the movie by engaging in harmful activities such as drinking and smoking while on his therapeutic medications, and withdrawing from family and friends. While common in most paranoid schizophrenics, Donnie did not withdraw from his family or friends. He actually got a girlfriend and maintained his relationship with others throughout the movie. Treatment. If Donnie did not end up dying in the plane accident, we would propose he would continue with his treatment prescribed to him by his therapist because in the 1980s, drugs and hypnotherapy were the best ways to help people struggling with schizophrenia. However, today we would propose Donnie be institutionalized for a little while to keep him from sleepwalking and ensuring that he's receiving proper help. We would prescribe him a medication and have him work with a therapist on not succumbing to his hallucinations. We think this would be appropriate for Donnie because he is endangering himself and others and needs more help. Some ethical concerns that come with institutionalization are that Donnie would most likely not want to be institutionalized, and therefore it would be against his wishes. Also, historically, mental health institutions have not had the best track record when helping certain diagnoses, including schizophrenia. Some of the cultural barriers that Donnie had when receiving help was religion because it's more prominent than science or mental health in the 80s.
Broader perspectives. Donnie Darko is a fairly accurate representation of paranoid schizophrenia in our opinion. Donnie presents with many of the symptoms that are most commonly seen in people diagnosed with this disorder. The main symptoms portrayed were hallucinations and the voices he interacted with. Due to its sci-fi nature, the representation is swayed more towards the outlandish ideas of time travel, and in the end we see that parallel universes come into play. This, however, doesn't completely diminish the portrayal of paranoid schizophrenia within the film, because in the parallel universe that Donnie does survive, he is dealing with this disorder consistently. I think after watching this movie, viewers would have a decent idea of how schizophrenia can affect a person. Oftentimes, when people watch movies with related subjects, mental illnesses, they think that because they've seen the movie, they understand the disorder. However, most often movies do not portray illnesses accurately, leaving people with false ideas. And that was our presentation over Donnie Darko.